Hello, quick announcement up front. If you entered the competition to win Caitlin Murray's book, The National Team, the inside story of the women who changed soccer, stick around to the end of the show. We will announce the winner. Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who wants every year to be Copa America year. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
It kind of feels like every year is Copa America year, given the regularity of that competition lately.
Right. So there was one in 2015. There was the Centenario in 2016. There's one in 2019 in Brazil. And we got official confirmation yesterday there's a 2020 Copa America and it will be hosted by Argentina and Colombia at the same time, and with a whole new format.
Not the United States, Australia, China, Russia, and Qatar, who all apparently bid to host the tournament.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I knew the US did. I knew Carlos Cordero sent that letter. I didn't know everybody else was all in on it.
Yeah, I didn't either, and I wonder how much that was like they actually bid versus China was like, I mean, I guess we could, and then they're like, no, we don't need you. We just want to add you to the list, so it looks like everybody wants to be involved.
So the thing everyone will be wondering is, will the US be involved?
Yeah.
We do know that when we look at the two groups of six, this is how it's going to be set up, there is sort of invited team number one and invited team number two. We do know that the US is often one of the invites, right? I think their first choice, CONMEBOL's first choice to fill it out to 12 teams, because they only have 10 teams in CONMEBOL, is to have the US and Mexico, because it's good local TV deals that you can get, right? They're sort of the two best teams within proximity.
This is true.
The US often turns it down because it clashes with the Gold Cup.
This is also true.
And or maybe sometimes the Confederations Cup. No, it doesn't clash with Confederations Cup, right?
Maybe. Again, it happens all the time. I don't know.
Yeah, it clashes with the Gold Cup often. This is why they've moved it to even-numbered years. This is why the 2019-2020, this is the reset. It's always going to be even-numbered years going forward. So we're going to get summers with Euros and Copa America at the same time.
Just to clarify, are you saying that you think they moved it to 2020 so the US and CONCACAF nations would participate?
Not just for the US, but just for, I think it just makes more sense to them generally. I mean, it means that Mexico can send a stronger team more regularly, for example.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it.
Like, I also think that, like, what are the competitions we've got this summer? We've got the Women's World Cup, we've got Copa America, we've got African Cup of Nations. There's one more in there, right? I'm forgetting. There's four.
The Gold Cup.
The Gold Cup. Thank you. Exactly. That's not good.
Copa de Oro.
But I do kind of think that, like, the Women's World Cup aside, that if you're CONMEBOL and you look at that and you think maybe we want to be associated with UEFA and put ourselves on that level footing of like, oh no, we're having these two competitions here and then the other ones are in odd years.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's possible. I also want to go like a little Field of Dreams style and just say like the United States is accepted and we'll be participating, and now we can just like we've built it, we've said it's going to happen, and so it's definitely going to happen.
If you say it on a podcast, it will come.
Yep, that's true.
To pass.
And if you say it with a monotone face, like a monotone voice and a kind of emotionless expression, then you're Kevin Costner saying it. I don't get that guy.
You're not
I don't
a
get
fan
that
of
guy.
Costner,
No, what is his acting ability? It's just him being like stoic.
He pretends to love baseball.
There we go. Exactly.
I mean, even though he already does, so he doesn't have to fake it. Easy, right?
So this is true. So another strange wrinkle to this one is, aside from moving the dates, I think that we've got the weird sort of division of the tournament now.
Yeah, so there's a North Zone and a South Zone, and it's hosted in, my geography's terrible. Is Argentina farther north?
I believe Colombia is farther north.
There we go.
Colombia connects to Panama, if that helps you out.
Like I said, the North Zone is hosted by Colombia and has 6 teams in it. And we know 5 of the 6 teams. They've already drawn it. So it's Colombia, Brazil, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, invited nation number 1.
Here's your helpful reminder that also reminds you that the United States geopolitical relationship in the Western Hemisphere, not great. The United States wanted the Panama Canal. Colombia, who then owned Panama, said no. We sailed a bunch of gunships to the coast of Colombia and said, are you sure? And then Panama became independent. That's roughly the story. So there you go. Hopefully that helps you remember. Yes, so the north. So that would be in the north one. We've got Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela. And invited nation number 1 is what I have written down. I'm very excited for that.
Which is USA or Mexico, probably.
Yeah, probably.
In the South Zone, down in Argentina. Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Paraguay, Uruguay. Invited nation number 2.
Of course.
So assuming the US and Mexico accept, like, either one of them could get drawn either of these two groups. It means, we don't have the full format, weirdly. You get 5 games. 6 teams in a group, you probably almost definitely get 5 games, right? And you at least get 1 game against Argentina or Brazil and against Chile or Colombia.
Yep.
Right? So you're going to play one of the big boys.
You will. I have to say, the other wrinkle that I really enjoy about this is that, whenever you have a tournament before it starts, you list those countries alphabetically, and they've done that, but invited nations number 1 and 2 are listed number 6, because I feel like they didn't want it to be Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, invited nation number 2. So they had to put them at the bottom.
So the other thing is, Brian Sciaretta pointed this out to me on Twitter after I retweeted the news, is that because this is a CONMEBOL tournament and because the US and Mexico
name drop
are CONCACAF nations, FIFA rules are like the teams are not they don't have to release players. So Toronto could say no, Michael Bradley can't go.
Yep.
Right. Dortmund could say no, Pulisic can't go. It's not in their season, right? Because this would be like June or July. I'm actually just scrolling back up to see the dates: 12th of June to 12th of July, 2020. Right. So it's not within the season, but you still could say, we want our player to rest this summer. So it could be that there has to be a lot of very persuasive phone calls from Greg Berhalter to get players released.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of phantom pain in the back, I think, for a few different players.
But wouldn't you love to play in this? Like to go to the Copa America
me personally, or
with
the
the strongest
States?
Possible squad? I mean, we're very far down the list if you make the squad.
Yeah.
With all due respect to your talents.
Hurtful, first of all. Second of all, accurate. Yes, I would. I think it's a competition the United States could definitely use. It's an official competition with like stuff that matters, and it doesn't quite have that element of the Copa America Centenario where like Neymar is prioritizing the Olympics, and we're not entirely sure is it a legit tournament or is it sort of a like cash grab that we're excited to have because it means another competition, but it also we're not sure how sincerely people are taking it.
Throwing shade at Copa America Centenario.
Correct.
Yeah.
All the shade, in fact.
Well, actually, I'm glad you raised it because I kind of feel like we're eventually still heading in that direction. Some sort of, this is what my dream, but also I think it might happen, is some sort of CONCACAF CONMEBOL summer tournament merger. Because it's still CONMEBOL trying to run a tournament and they literally don't have enough teams every time they do it. They have to invite some nations. And the Gold Cup is kind of thin on talent, right? In terms of big nations. To me, it would just make sense to jam these two things together and have a CONCACAF CONMEBOL tournament.
I agree.
Eventually.
Except the issue then, as we've talked about before, is that with CONMEBOL you have 10 member nations. With CONCACAF you have, 43, 45, something like that? I should know that, but I don't.
But then you have some sort of qualification tournament from CONCACAF and make that like the Gold Cup kind of.
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
I think do it.
I think it's just as long as you're keeping as many teams from CONCACAF included or theoretically involved as possible, then more nations are likely to go for that.
Here's my theory is, I don't think this is why they've done it, but at least moving Copa America to a different summer than the Gold Cup opens it up to use the Gold Cup as a qualification for the next Copa America.
That could be.
Yeah.
Maybe that's all in the works.
Just saying, I think that should happen.
That said, the fact that right now they've announced the tournament with invited nation number 1 and number 2 in different zones without really specifying how the knockout round is going to work, I feel like there's not a lot of long-term planning here.
What do we know? Top 4 in each group qualify. So we assume some sort of quarterfinal, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to go another group stage. Because this 16 group stage is going to take a while, right?
Yep.
It's going to take a while.
Yes, it will. And yes, so it's top 4 in each go through. But then again, we don't know. Is it like winner of North Zone playing 4th place team from South Zone? Do they kind of stay in their respective areas and only meet at the final?
My guess would be you stay in the zone, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise you're flying back and forth all over the continent of America.
Yes. So yeah, that's not necessarily the ideal setup.
All right, so there's your Copa America 2020 news. Maybe something to look forward to from the US men's national team. I'm sure we'll get confirmation that they've accepted the invite like mid-June 2020.
That sounds...
They'll definitely leave us hanging.
It'll definitely show up on Wikipedia before it shows up on US Soccer's website, that's for darn sure.
Hey, this is Daryl cutting in with an update. After we recorded this episode, I saw some news on Globo Esporte, which I believe is a Brazilian publication, suggesting that the invited teams to Copa America 2020 will not be USA and Mexico. I saw that I think Qatar is one of the invited teams, and it's maybe a coincidence that Qatar Airways is a CONMEBOL sponsor, and that China could be the other invited team in 2020. So I think we've been assuming that USA and Mexico were the preferred invitees because they have been in the past, and maybe that was, economically good for CONMEBOL. But maybe they're looking to Qatar and China. Maybe that's where the money is now. So we don't know. I'm still crossing my fingers that maybe the US gets an invite. But the news from Globo Esporte is that Qatar and maybe China are the 2020 invitees.
One player who could be participating in that 2020 Copa America is Weston McKennie,
Yeah.
which leads us to our listener question number one of the day.
Coming how many? Seven listener questions today.
Yes.
Yeah.
This one comes from Brian Burgett, probably more likely. What am I missing when I watch Weston McKennie? I'm only really seeing him with the U.S. men's national team, and to me, he kind of seems to lack a bit of grace and technical skill for someone so highly regarded. What am I missing?
I mean, a lot. I think you probably haven't seen the best of Weston McKennie if you watch him in a US national team shirt, because outside of that first Dave Saracen game where we played Portugal, and McKennie scored actually in that game, right? I think he's been a victim of the kind of disorganized US team that the US was under Saracen, right? Excluding that Bolivia game where we murdered that Bolivian C team, he was excellent there, right? But that was against some very weak opposition. He played like a number 6 and sprayed the ball everywhere, but there were big holes to spray the ball
I mean,
into.
I don't mean for this to sound dismissive, but like that game made Josh Sargent and Timothy Weah look like Leo Messi and Luis Suarez. Like the way they were linking up and just tearing a hole through that Bolivia team. But I also think that's a good example of Weston McKennie there, because I feel like that Bolivia game, they were trying to be physical, and I think his physicality paid dividends for the U.S. because he could ride some of those challenges, but then also because of his good distribution, could then play the ball into the channel, could then play Josh Sargent in on goal, and then could, if need be, just kind of play short, simple passes to pull Bolivia around and cause problems. So I did think his distribution in that game was good, but I understand why maybe the physicality stands out from that game.
And if you've seen him play for Schalke when Schalke were decent, basically last season, not this year, what you see is a guy who is hyper competitive in central midfield, and that's really impressive for like a 20-year-old or 19 as he was then, winning balls everywhere, big side tackles that he wins, gets to every header, gets there first, like super competitive, like offering a lot of defensive capability. But then when he gets the ball, I would argue he has a lot of grace and technical skill. He's got a lot of nice little swerves. He can pick out a pass. There's a lot going on with McKennie. But again, if you watch him in the US national team, there's the Saracen days, and then he's only had one game under Berhalter, right? He played an hour or so against Ecuador and got injured doing maybe an overly aggressive tackle. And also he had some bad moments receiving the ball. So I would concede he did not have a great game against Ecuador. And maybe you see the worst of him there.
I would agree, because I think like the things that you love about Weston McKennie can easily be the things that cause problems. Because going back to that first game against Portugal, we remember if you remember the video of him in training where he was the one who, like, when somebody gave the ball away, he would try to like flick them in the ear because that was the punishment for like not doing keepy uppies the right way. And he does have that level of competitiveness and that kind of level of trash talking swagger that we have not necessarily had from the US, or at least haven't had publicly.
His role model was Jermaine Jones.
Exactly.
Because Jones was like a senior player at Schalke when McKennie was a real kid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think you can then have the flip side to that, and I think this year will end up being, I hope, a sort of anomaly for him because of the way things have been with the U.S. national team, or like the last 18 months maybe, like the way things have been at national team level combined with this season from Schalke. It's sort of, I understand how your narrative on him could be like kind of erratic, irregular performer for the U.S., gets injured, commits a lot of fouls, is kind of like Jermaine Jones, but maybe not quite that level of Jermaine Jones for the U.S., plays a bunch of positions for Schalke but doesn't seem to excel, and they're not that good of a team. And I think that we're going to look back on this time period as very much an outlier in his career because either Schalke stabilize or they don't and he moves on. And I think he ends up at a better team who maybe have scouted him properly and recognize he can bring a lot to the table.
To a very specific position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I would hope for him. Wherever he goes, just somewhere that he plays regularly in a very specific position. And hopefully it kind of matches what Berhalter wants him to do as a sort of 8/10 for the US men's national team. I think we'll see the best of him if he's fit, maybe in the Gold Cup, something like that.
But
so don't give up hope, Brian.
And I want to move on, but I just want to say, like, Brian should not give up hope. That's definitely true. But I also want to say, like, I understand where this question is coming from. Because in his national team performances, he's looked good at times, he's looked rough at times, and so I think.
Would you agree? He looked like he's trying to do too much almost a few times?
I absolutely
under Saracen, and then especially I think in that Ecuador game under Berhalter.
And I think part of that is maybe because of sort of we didn't have the stabilized coaching situation. Then when we did have Greg Berhalter, he wasn't there for the January camp. So I think coming into these March friendlies, he was really trying to show that he deserved a spot and maybe tried to do a little bit too much there. He was
also trying to be accommodating of Jordan Morris, right? Jordan Morris wasn't quite following the plan correctly, and McKennie was worried about stepping on his toes, and he was trying to do that switch, but Morris wasn't doing it. So he ran into kind of a tactical problem in terms of maybe him a little bit, but also Jordan Morris not quite knowing how to pull off that role, right? So there's that too.
Thanks a lot, Jordan.
Don't be harsh on Jordan Morris.
All right, fine, I won't. But thank you, Brian, for that question. We very much appreciate it. Many more questions to get to, as we've already indicated. But first, we should talk about today's sponsor.
Oh, yeah. Today's show is sponsored by Dollar Shave Club.
Yes, sir.
Dollar Shave Club, you will have heard about them earlier this week. We talked about the starter sets. We talked very specifically about the shower set because your Airbnb co-guests were very impressed with what you brought to the bathroom.
Yeah. Wow. That's one way of putting it.
I'm assuming that's where you keep it.
Yes, it was, which is why it kept getting used. But one thing we didn't talk about with the sage and black pepper shampoo and conditioner is that it has a sort of like almost menthol quality to it. I think that's like the pepper combined with the sage, that it has the nice cooling agent, so you can sit there in the hot shower with a cold head. And especially in the summer, that can be a pleasant experience if it's like 95 degrees outside and humid, which, given that it's spring in Richmond and it's just started, that will be happening in 5 days, 6 days?
Yeah, probably. Get ready for the swelter.
Yep.
So there's the starter set
ready for the swelter.
There's a thing Jason Davis said the other day. He's enjoying Audi Field before it sweltered.
Yep.
So there's the shower set we talked about, the oral care. We've raved about the toothbrush.
Yep.
We really mean it, right? That toothbrush is something special. And then there is also obviously the razor, razor set that comes with the shave butter.
Yes.
I keep forgetting Dollar Shave Club's original business is shaving.
Yes.
But here's the thing. There's all the starter sets. And if you go to dollarshaveclub.com/TSS, you can get one of those starter sets for $5. But there's all kinds of other products that you can purchase direct from the website. And we should say, full disclosure, when we first started advertising with DSC, as I call them, we're on acronym basis.
We are.
Initialism basis, excuse me. They sent us a lot of sample products of all the stuff you can buy from the website. And there's a lot of it that's really worth talking about,
I think that's an acronym, isn't it?
No, an acronym has to be a word.
Does it?
Like you have to be able to say, NASA is an acronym.
I thought that was an anagram.
No, an anagram's a jumbled up word.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm all confused now. I'm all twisted around. Anyway, Dollar Shave Club.
Yes. Do you remember, Taylor? They sent us a box of those products.
I do.
And outside of the starter sets, you can buy all kinds of those products. I wanted to ask you, because we've basically sampled all of them, right? What do you like? What do you recommend from the outside of the starter sets?
I'm out of the pomade. I'll say that much. I use that real fast. I have naturally very curly hair. I have almost like Shirley Temple ringlet hair.
Yeah, you do.
I'm sure there's a better pop culture person to use nowadays than Shirley Temple.
Oh, no, very current.
That's what I'm going with. And so with my hair cut short, it still requires a bit of styling
Napoleon
and a bit of product.
Dynamite, that's what I go with.
I thght you were saying I look like that, and I was about to come over this table on you. I have a chin. Thank you very much. But the pomade is very good. It's very high quality. It has a very good hold. And we have the same barber. My barber has constantly talked to me about how frustrating it is because pomade can be very expensive and very difficult to find, and especially good pomade that actually has good hold but isn't too shiny, but isn't too sticky, and doesn't leave your hair looking all crusty. The Dollar Shave Club pomade is excellent.
Also just launched, they've got a line of deodorants and what are called one-wipe Charlies. You can guess what those are for. Right?
You can. Yeah, and we'll leave it at that.
They're also apparently peppermint scented. And I'm going to say, if you want to risk it, go for the one-wipe Charlies with the peppermint.
I'm going to hope they're not peppermint scented as much as they're peppermint, infused.
Okay.
Yeah, so you get the cooling situation.
Still sounds slightly risky.
It does. I mean, it certainly does.
Or
but
maybe it just freshens you up.
Just can't imagine a situation where I would need that area to smell like peppermint. So that's also kind of where I am. But I will say, going back to the original message here, that with the original, the shave kit, it allows us, we talked about this when we were looking at Barcelona today, when Arturo Vidal subbed on. Daryl Grove, very impressed by his facial hair styling. He had very nice lines. It was very well shaped. Be like Arturo Vidal. Don't be like David De Gea with his mutton shop neckbeard situation. It's not good. It's not a great look. But Arturo Vidal is who you want to be. Dollar Shave Club can help you be that way. And then he's always got the very well-styled, very rigid mohawk.
Yeah.
Again, you can go even further. Dollar Shave Club has hair gel. They've got hair fiber that can hold it even better. So there you go. They've got you covered for whichever player you want to be.
Whichever player you want to be.
Just have good facial hair.
You can use Dollar Shave Club products to be the player you want to be.
You can.
Or at least you can look good, smell good. And
if you want
to get $5, you want to get a starter set for $5, you go to dollarshaveclub.com/TSS. And do you use the discount code TSS, or you just go to dollarshaveclub.com/TSS?
That's dollarshaveclub.com/TSS. So I'm going to say you just go to that site and you get that discount automatically applied.
And we'll put the link in the show notes so you can easily find it.
That would be ideal.
And once you've got the starter sets, then your subscription will renew and you'll get the full-size products shipped in the future to restock.
Some part of you may end up smelling like peppermint. Ideally with the toothpaste, is what I'm saying.
More questions?
Yep.
Okay. You asked the first one,
I
right?
did.
Okay, second one is from Owen Huang. Why does China suck at soccer?
Fair.
Especially considering, one, they literally have 1 billion people from which to find 11 gems. And two, they spend so much money in their domestic league.
Yeah. So this is one I don't have much familiarity with China, and especially with Chinese soccer or the lack thereof. So this is one where I was doing the research of my own.
Yeah.
And so part of this is stuff that I feel comfortable saying, and part of this is stuff that I feel slightly uncomfortable saying because part of it does feel sort of cultural.
Should I start inching my chair away?
Probably. I hope not. If I end up with a cardboard box full of my stuff after the end of the show, we'll know I should have said
I feel like
this.
I should inch out of shot.
Yeah, that's fair. But and I would welcome to hear from people who have familiarity with China, with Chinese society, with Chinese education system, because, again, this is stuff that I've read. Some of it is. But I'm not going to get to that first. I'm going to start off with some more basic ideas for me, one of which is that we have an assumption that all the Chinese people are trying to be good at soccer, and they just can't get it together. And the reality is it's a relatively recent occurrence, right?
Yep.
The Chinese premier, PM, whatever, I forget what the actual title
Xi
is.
Jinping
Yes.
took power in 2012.
Yep.
He was the one that said, I want to make us good at soccer.
Yep.
And he encouraged a lot of businessmen to invest in soccer. That's why the Chinese Super League suddenly was paying crazy money for like Carlos Tevez and those kinds of players. And then also, I believe they set up some like training centers and they're building infrastructure. But if you start in 2012, you don't get the results straight away.
You don't.
Right? You might not get it for 40 years.
But I also think that infrastructure itself is slightly problematic because, first of all, a lot of that are like high-end training academies and training facilities to help develop players at club level. But it's not building parks, putting up goals. And so from what I understand, it's difficult to find a field where you can go play soccer.
Yeah.
And especially so it's difficult to find a field where you can go play soccer where people are already playing soccer.
Yeah. So is this as simple as like China just isn't a soccer-dominant culture?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So to find kids playing pickup, you're not really going to do that. And so it becomes you have to do it at a very standardized, organized level, which gets me to the second thing that...
It's almost like the American problem.
Yeah, kind of, except a little bit different, is that from what I understand, like the Chinese, like a lot of people approach this as China's so good at the Olympics in so many different sports. Why aren't they better at soccer? They win all these medals. And the answer to that, from what I understand, is that a lot of those sports are individual and they're based on years and years of individual discipline, of training as an individual.
And they're relatively popular in China, right?
Yeah.
Like I read things like badminton is popular in China, right?
Table tennis as well,
Yeah.
not ping pong. Don't be offensive.
All right.
I mean, that's one of those like soccer football sort of situations, I believe. But I think with that comes this idea that like sport can be studied scientifically, that you can break down velocity of a serve when it comes to table tennis, or like how to better like build a gymnast like via scientific process. Soccer doesn't.
In a weird science kind of way?
No, but yes. I think because there are all the stories of like Chinese children at the age of 6 who are like taken to a specialty gymnastics center, and that's all they do for 10 years. And I think there is an inclination to do that same thing when it comes to soccer, but soccer doesn't really lend itself to that. So this kind of like, it seems like there's a rigid sort of instruction in place about we are going to develop Lionel Messis all over the place. That's not really how it works. You got to bring a bunch of kids together, hopefully have some of them be good, and have them play and evolve as players, not necessarily do the same drills to establish how to play. So
and you also have the problem that even like I know the Premier League is like big-ish in China, and I know that the actual domestic league gets decent attendance. I think the average attendance is 24,000. It's not bad, right? But the number one television viewing sport in China is the NBA.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the NBA reached out earlier, I think 2002 or so. David Stern went over there and got the NBA on CCTV. I know is it Weibo is the Chinese social media app that's kind of like Twitter, as I understand it. The NBA has a deal where they can put highlights on there, and like, NBA is all over China.
Yeah.
And then there have been Chinese players in the NBA
that's the
drive
key
popularity.
Thing. That's
right?
another big one for me, is that like Yao Ming is to basketball what Christian Pulisic I think will be to soccer. That there are so many kids we see now with Christian Pulisic jerseys that you had when you had John O'Brien at Ajax, you didn't see a lot of John O'Brien jerseys. Christian Pulisic I think was like that mainstream introduction for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just as Yao Ming was.
I've watched way more Bundesliga because of an interest in Pulisic and then other Americans than I would have otherwise.
Yeah. I think, and like the closest
I have opinions about Ashraf Hakimi that I wouldn't have had if Pulisic wasn't playing there.
There we go. Exactly. But I think like the closest maybe we've come was like Dong Fangzhou, who was
Man United?
He was there for like 2 games, and I think he ended up having to have like facial reconstructive surgery because people would make fun of him because of how bad his career went. Like exactly.
Is that true?
I read that like a couple years ago. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it was an article I read. So the internet would never lie. So I think they don't have that next level athlete that kind of increases more interest in the sport.
Oh, they need a superstar is what you're saying. They need a Pulisic.
Exactly.
Or a Yao Ming for soccer, yeah.
Yeah, and so this is then... Sorry, I've been talking a lot. Do you have some things you want to throw out?
The major things I want to address Owen's first point. They literally have 1 billion people.
Yeah.
I don't think that's helpful. I actually think it's harder to find 11 really good players in 11 billion people than it is to find it in a much smaller nation like the Netherlands or Belgium, right? And it's not just about soccer culture. I think it's really about... It actually makes it harder, right? It's 1 billion people, but not all of them are playing soccer. That means it's even harder to find the soccer players, right?
I mean, I would go so far as to say with 1 billion people and the geographic spread of China, you probably have a significant percentage of those billion have probably never even seen soccer.
And there is no correlation between population size and being good at soccer, right? India, not great at soccer. The US for a long time, not great at soccer, despite having way more people than any European country, right?
Exactly.
Population size is not an indicator of talent.
Nope. It is not. And now we get to the part that I'm slightly uncomfortable with.
Oh, do we still have to do it?
Yeah, kind of. Because there's I think there's a societal element to it again. Okay. And this is what I've read, so I would welcome people who know more. But it sounds to me like Chinese parents are a bit more protective and a bit more career focused. Okay. That the idea in China, because China is very competitive, especially as you kind of move up in society, that you want your
kids... social standing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That you want your kid to go to a very good school so that they can go to a very good, secondary school so they can go to a very good university and be like that top tier. There's not that idea of or they could be a professional soccer player. And from what I've read, it's even to the extent that some of those high-end, high-level training facilities are basically for kids who aren't doing well in school. And it's they're probably not going to go to the best university, so maybe we'll try this.
Let's see if we can cross them.
Yeah, and so I think, and if you are, I think, again, from what I've read, Chinese parents a bit more rigid and a bit more structured in their parenting approach, which means there's not as much free time. There's not as much free time for activities. And so if there are, it's something where you can kind of practice it for an hour and you can be done with it. And it's indoors.
So you can't play hours of pickup soccer.
Exactly. Yeah. So one thing I read from a Chinese person who was talking about their experience was they would play for 20 minutes after lunch and 20 minutes after school, but then they had to do all of their lessons and learn 5 different subjects on top of what they were learning in school. Yeah. And so it doesn't really allow for a lot of free time to go out and play soccer and be identified and have everybody recognize ooh, this could be the next Christian Pulisic.
Yeah. Okay, so there's many reasons why China is not so good at soccer. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Xi Jinping sort of push does have some effect in the future. I don't think China's going to become the best team in the world, but they might more regularly make the World Cup, for example, and just grow in standing a little bit.
There we go.
Okay, you ready for another question?
I mean, they've made it to a World Cup before, right? They were there
they've been at a World Cup, but they're not regulars.
And I believe also lost every game. 0 goals scored 9 against, I think it was, something like that.
I don't remember.
Yeah, not great.
Okay, next question.
Justin Odom, based on current FIFA rankings, this question gave me a lot of thinking time. Based on current FIFA rankings, what is the lowest ranked national team that could win the MLS Supporters Shield?
So basically be the best team in MLS over the course of the season. I actually like the question because MLS Cup can be a bit random.
A little bit.
Right? So essentially, could you be the best team in MLS? What is the lowest FIFA ranked team?
Also, people who are considering sending questions, another reason why Justin's question is great is because if he just said who could win MLS Cup, to me that's any team could sort of come together and have a good tournament and find their way through.
Which team's good in October?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so I like the idea of which team has the depth.
I think that's England, actually.
Yeah, that could work out. Which team has the depth to be able to play through an entire Major League Soccer season and the demands that it requires?
So my answer is I think it's a quirk of the FIFA rankings, but it's the number 49 ranked team.
Ooh, you went further back than I did.
Russia.
Wait, are they 49? I have them as 46.
I looked at the FIFA.com and the rankings.
So did I. That's interesting. But that is who I had too. I have Russia as well, yes.
Do we think Russia are ranked so low? Here's my theory. Russia are ranked so low because they didn't play any World Cup qualifiers leading up to 2018. They had all friendlies because they were the hosts. So they missed out on a bunch of FIFA World Ranking points. Yes. So they're probably a lot lower than they should be.
Yes.
There's a lot of talent on that Russia team, right? We saw Smolov, Juba, Golovin, Jagoev, all these guys. There are a lot of guys that aren't famous superstars because they haven't moved to Western Europe because they're getting paid in Russia, right? Jagoev getting paid in Russia, Smolov getting paid in Russia. So I think there's enough talent on that team that it could win the Supporters Shield.
I agree.
Not walk away with it, but they'd be deeper than most MLS teams.
Yeah, because I think for me, the criteria I kind of sort of established for myself were that it needed to be players who come from somewhat known leagues. Because, for example, Egypt. I don't know enough about the Egyptian Premier League if it's even called that, to know like how good that level like of ability is, that quality is across the board.
Yeah.
So
and you're one Mo Salah injury away from them not being a great team in MLS.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Exactly. So, but with Russia, I mean, it's a league that's sending teams to the Champions League that is very competitive for the most part, from top to bottom. And I think
I've just realized they get booed a lot.
They do.
If the
they
would.
Yeah,
if the Russian team came and played in Major League Soccer, they'd get booed a lot.
And then my other
good turnout
that I strangely it would be a good turnout,
especially in blue states.
Yep. I wonder where the biggest turnout like for pro Russia would be. I'm going to assume New York because New York is big.
Just Russian expats.
Yeah, I think so. But I would also say that like I looked at this strangely. It's a very like not sort of concrete way of doing it. It's a non-Chinese government way of doing it, where it's very scientific. But it's sort of I expect Major League Soccer teams and fans to be excited about signing these players. To me, that means like, they would be high quality. It wouldn't be like, they're kind of an unknown quantity. We'll see what happens. It would be like, yep, get him in there. He is awesome. We would love to have him. Would a lot of these players be DPs? Yes, they would.
That's a good point, yeah. And especially after the 2018 World Cup, when I assume soccer fans paid attention.
Yeah.
I love the names I listed off were, big hits at the World Cup. Golovin was like, whoa, look at this guy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean? Yeah, I mean, but like could any, is it Juba? Is that
the big centre forward?
Yeah, could anybody handle him? I don't know. I feel like he'd end up marking Zlatan on some free set pieces, free kicks, and I would enjoy that immensely.
He'd be trouble in the air for quite a few people. Yeah.
And it is like the weirdness of the rankings, right? Because there are teams certainly ranked higher up the table than Russia that I would say would not win the Supporters Shield, significantly higher up. In fact, I think Wales and Iran are in the 20s.
I think Wales would have a good go at it.
You think?
I think like with Gareth Bale, you got who's the guy with the same name as the columnist, plays for Bournemouth? David Brooks.
There you go.
Coming through. Wales have got some talent.
Aaron Ramsey in there too.
Aaron Ramsey, I think that's a good MLS team, but maybe not as deep as you would like. Yeah.
The other wrinkle,
Ashley Williams, it'd be tough on his knees playing all that travel and then all the turf.
Ooh, and Ryan Giggs figuring out Major League Soccer would be terrific. I would say this. Here's my other wrinkle. If it's the case that the team has to play in their home country for their home games, then I've got Ecuador as the number 59, because playing at altitude is going to be a huge problem for a lot of teams. Maybe not Colorado and Real Salt Lake, but even then I think it's still a little bit higher.
Is Ecuador altitude?
I think so, yeah, because it's always it's like, isn't it Bolivia and Ecuador the like two hardest?
I knew Bolivia, I didn't know Ecuador.
I think they're always the ones that like win every game at home and lose every game on the road.
So just the Colorado Rapids would beat them.
Yep, pretty much.
If you discount Russia, because I do think it's a quirk of the rankings that they're so low, Serbia at number 29 is not a bad bet.
Okay.
Because you've got Mitrovic coming in there. You've got Dusan Tadic, played for Ajax yesterday, by the time you hear this, against Juventus, and Sergei Milinkovic-Savic. I'm not sure how deep their roster is, but there's three guys that would definitely be DPs in Major League Soccer.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
think Matic might have retired.
It does come down to depth, though. So,
yeah,
I'm with you there. I still have Russia as 46 in my rankings, because now I'm scrolling up, because like then it kind of gets into a crapshoot of like Turkey maybe, Greece maybe, but again I can't say I have a familiarity to be able to back them completely.
Okay, all right. I think we've answered that question. Then I always love questions like this because it is so hard to gauge the level of Major League Soccer that I love putting any sort of weird hypothesis up against it to see what happens. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Because we're assuming that like any big nation, England, France, Brazil, Germany, would easily win the Supporters Shield.
Yep.
Right? So you have to go pretty far down the list to figure it out.
England probably would, right?
I'm pretty confident.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Although they would all probably melt in the sun. That's the only flip side to it.
They freeze in the winter and melt in the sun.
Yeah, that checks out.
We're just used to like temperate but rainy. We want it nice and in the middle and rainy.
Yeah, perfect. So Seattle?
Portland.
Okay.
Yeah, Pacific Northwest is the way to go, I think. Today's show is sponsored by Hims, a wellness brand for men. You've heard us talking about Hims and how they are helping guys look their best. If you haven't yet, it's time to see what they're all about.
Especially if you're starting to wonder if maybe it's thinning out up top. 66% of men start to lose their hair by the age of 35. And especially if you're a professional soccer player, you don't want to be a Bobby Charlton. You want to be a Wayne Rooney. And I don't mean that in terms of like Wayne Rooney had like naturally beautiful hair. You want to take action before it's too late.
Yes. I don't know what action Wayne Rooney took.
I believe he had a transplant. So too did Jurgen Klopp and Antonio Conte. They both talked publicly about their hair transplants. But
you've got to have that Rooney money, I think, to do that.
You absolutely do. And then you've got to like travel, because there are certain places that specialize in hair transplants. It seems like a giant ordeal to be able to keep the hair you have. Instead, you could just go to Hims and they've got you covered.
Literally. So Bobby Charlton, I was trying to double down on that because people may not know about Bobby Charlton. It is famous in England, the Bobby Charlton comb over.
Do you think he thought he was pulling it off?
I think he was just doing what he could
Okay.
with what was available at the time.
Yeah.
This was pre-Hims.
Man, I had a professor in college who would like slick it over. Like he would like lick his hand and slick it over in
Yeah.
class. And I was just like, it's not working, man. Know it's not working. So yeah, don't be that, because if you're kind of wondering, go check out Hims. They can help you deal with that hairline before it's all gone away.
So how does it work? It is not snake oil pills.
It is not.
You do not buy it at the gas station.
You do
I'll be
not.
Really specific about that.
If you do, it's stolen or someone is
Yeah.
reselling it, and don't buy that product.
Yeah, and check the spelling because it's probably
Yeah.
like Hims with a Y or something.
Definitely is that. Yeah.
Make sure it's Hims. This is a prescription solution. It is backed by science. There's a famous hair solution. This is the generic version that's available. Much cheapness.
much cheapness. Best of all, our listeners can get started with Hims, the complete Hims hair kit for just $5 today, right now while supplies last, and subject to doctor's approval. See their website for full details and safety information.
This could cost hundreds if you went to the doctor or a pharmacy somewhere else. And this is the hair loss treatment that is being talked about in GQ, Men's Health, Esquire, and Playboy, to name just a few.
So go to forhims.com/totalsoccer. That's FORHIMS.com/totalsoccer. Forhims.com/totalsoccer.
Oh, I thought you were about to throw to me. You took
Never.
it all for yourself.
I did indeed. So thank you to Hims for sponsoring today's episode. Daryl Grove, shall we do some more questions? Or answering of questions, I suppose, would be the better way to put it.
Let's answer some more questions. Next up is Peter Strong. Peter Strong wants to know, as the women's game develops worldwide and the best US players stay in the NWSL, which is the thing that's happening, right? Because US soccer pays salaries, so they play in NWSL. Does the US women's national team run the risk of falling to the level of the US men's national team relative to the competition?
All right. I have like a more useful answer for the purposes of Peter's question, but I would start off by saying, like, I get where this question is coming from, but to me it's a bit like stating, if MLS continues to develop and become the best in the world, are English players in danger of falling back to a level because they're staying in the Premier League? Like, you're kind of worrying about a future thing. Yes, it's starting to happen more.
This is a thing that's happening.
And that's the thing that I would go to, is like, for me, it's kind of the equivalent of going from like 1980s, 1990s Dream Team to the Olympic basketball teams of today, where it used to be everybody gets destroyed 120-4. Now it's a little bit closer. And I think that's where we are, is that other teams around the world are starting to put more money into it. More women are playing, more young girls are playing, and then kind of continuing through. So other teams are improving. But I think we're at that point now where we're moving from being dominant and expecting to win every competition to suddenly we're being challenged by countries that maybe didn't used to challenge us.
Yep.
And that can be a scary reality, but it's also a reality.
I think this is the first World Cup, the World Cup coming up, where the US may still just be the favourite because they're champions and because they have that aura about them. But suddenly teams that were not quite there are there.
Yeah.
Like Australia, England suddenly is a challenger.
Yeah.
France suddenly a challenger. Germany's been there a little while, but they're still there. Suddenly that's 4 teams already that I've named, right? It used to be basically China and Norway. Now Japan as well since maybe 2011. They literally won it in 2011, right? So suddenly there's a lot more competitors. And a lot of in fact, all of the teams I just named, Spain on the up as well. It's because of the professional women's league that's happening in their country, right? England has the FA Women's National League. There's the Frauen Bundesliga. There's La Liga Femenino. You can see I've researched all this. So I want to say it out. Yeah. And there's Division 1 Feminine in France. And the big thing that they have that the US is lacking is basically the financial power of the men's teams, essentially big sports clubs that are backing the women's teams. They have more resources to draw from. It used to be that the US drew resources from collegiate soccer because of Title IX, and that was the big advantage, the big head start the US women's national team has. If it comes to this, where it's Premier League teams and Bundesliga teams providing resources and infrastructure for women's teams professionally in the country, we're going to get outrun, I think, because we can't match that. So if those leagues end up being the strongest, like England, France, Germany, maybe Spain eventually gets there, but we still have the US women playing in the NWSL, like not going and playing in Europe, we could end up with the same situation as like where everyone was upset that Bradley and Altidore and Dempsey came home when they should have been going and playing at the best tier in Europe. It's not there yet. I think NWSL might still be the best league.
I think it definitely is.
I think Meg Linehan argued that in her first Athletic article. But it could shift, and when that happens, we might be in trouble.
Yeah, but I feel like you're steering into like there's a lot of like could and if, and then what happens maybe could be, and I think it's a lot of conditionals. No, because
it's slowly happening. It is slowly happening.
Right, but I guess I feel like that's a natural progression of like the United States cannot always be far and away the best league and team in the world because everyone's going to start playing it more. You can't kind of have that imbalance forever. What I think is the bigger factor here is if NWSL doesn't keep growing. That's what it is for me. It's not necessarily what the other leagues are doing. It's if you stay with 9 teams right now, that's not enough for like Brazilians and Norwegians and Swedes and English women and like French women, like to have all these players come over, there's not the roster space, so they have to look elsewhere. If NWSL, not saying they should, but if they expand to 15, that's a massive amount of players that now need to fill those spots, and then maybe more money comes in with it, or if there's more money put into it, then there's more expansion, and I think that's what it is for me. It's the league that needs to expand.
I think money's the big thing, right? Essentially, if the best players can get paid more in Germany or England, then the best players go to Germany or England,
of course.
Right? And that will be the NWSL's problem, is if the more money is available elsewhere. Yeah. And then it becomes, to me, it would then become, this is projecting out into the future, a player like Alex Morgan could get really paid, right? If she went for more than just a short spell at Lyon, she could make a lot more money there if NWSL doesn't keep up. Yeah. Then it becomes that thing of, does US Soccer put pressure on her to try and stay in NWSL? Or do they say, okay, Alex Morgan, go earn your money over there?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely a big factor because you want to be able to have the freedom of movement to go try yourself in different leagues. And these players have. Alex Morgan has played in France. Yeah. Megan Rapinoe has played in France. So
but only briefly, right? And then comes back.
Exactly. Yeah. And Crystal done the same. And I think part of that is comfort. I genuinely do think that. Part of that is, there's the U.S. U.S. soccer connection that requires them to come back, basically.
And I think actually to answer Peter's question, I think the last part is really the most important. Does the women's national team risk falling to level of the US men's national team relative to the competition? I would say no in the short term, right? They just risk not being the very best because that's it's not sustainable anyway, as you sort of said. But they might, if things go bad, they could fall out of the immediate favourites, right? They could be top of the second tier of maybe they could win the World Cup instead of being maybe the first name everyone mentions when you start thinking about potential World Cup winners.
Yeah. I also wonder if there's...
It can only fall so far, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I would also say this doesn't quite relate to the question, but I think it's worth bringing up. I do think that there's always, if you are the dominant team forever, if you're the New York Yankees of women's soccer at an international level, there's going to be somebody who goes the Moneyball route. And I think the team that gets the best talent developed but also embraces new ideas. And I think one thing is that I think a lot of times, still in the United States, women's soccer is coached as though it's men's soccer. And it's a very different sport. And I think so. That if you're going in expecting, if you're a high school boys coach and the high school girls coach and you're running the same training sessions.
Oh, is that often the case? One coach runs both teams?
I mean, I don't know if that's often the case. I'm using that as an example of if your background is coaching men's, boys sports and you transition over and you decide, okay, I'm going to coach the women's team this year. Yeah. I think that doesn't prepare you to coach that team. And if you don't
We'll see what Phil Neville does this summer.
We will.
He's done pretty well so far.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, but he's kind of going against the grain on that.
But I'm also talking about development more so than the national team as it exists now. But I think the team that maybe embraces new ideas and new ways of playing and new formations and tactics, that also I think helps you challenge the team that is kind of still playing a 4-3-3 and they have the best players so they can do it. If suddenly there's a system that comes in that totally undermines that, then the U.S. runs into problems there as well.
Maybe we see that at the 2019 Women's World Cup.
We shall see. We shall see. All the more reason to watch.
Okay, next question.
Yep, I think it's my turn. Ian Brady asks, players are looking for every advantage to be faster, with shoes being 0.2 ounces lighter as advertised is better. For a while, Kyle Beckerman's dreadlocks had to weigh a pound or two and make him slower, right? Says Ian. He seems to be listed in the 163 to 165 pounds range, so a few pounds would seem to make a difference. Would being a little faster have made him a better U.S. national team player?
Yes. Being faster would have made Kyle Beckerman a better US national team player, right? Because he could have covered more ground from defensive midfield, close people down faster. No, losing some hair would not be enough to make that happen.
Why not?
It's just not enough weight off the top of your head to make you go faster. I really don't think that's
I think I would agree with that. One thing I would say is that it's definitely hotter. And if you've got a big old head of hair and you're playing in pretty hot temperatures, it can be a little bit of an issue, though it didn't really play Carlos Valderrama too much. But maybe that's what I would say. But I also think that the idea that Kyle Beckerman's game would have been better if he were like incrementally faster.
Yeah.
It's not really what his game was about in the first place.
And maybe if you are incrementally faster, it's not going to be much, right? It's not going to be enough to notice. He needs he would have needed some sort of like scientific Captain America type miracle to make him faster.
He did cut those dreads off, and maybe that was the difference.
Maybe to prolong his career.
There it is. It could well be. So I get where Ian's coming from, and I love the idea of the question, but I would say no. Probably wouldn't have made him a better player.
It's worth noting as well, part of the premise is that shoes being 0.2 ounces lighter advertised as better. I think the key word there is advertised as opposed to scientifically proven.
Oh, man.
I believe in traction and things like that being superior and helping you like turn faster and get a better like grip and all that sort of stuff. I don't believe in 0.2 ounces in your shoes making a difference. If anything, you're more likely to get your foot broke.
That was
remember all the metatarsal injuries that happened after the light shoes came out? Yeah.
That is a thing that I have only recently realized how hardcore I bought into was the marketing of shoes. Like Nike put out the ones that had bumps on them, and it was like for control of the ball, like the little. And it's just like, is that the case, or was Nike just like repackage the other shoes but put some bumps on them?
Sell them to the kids whose control's rubbish.
Exactly. I mean, but that's kind of what I mean. Like I remember the idea that like Predator made the ball curve or made it not curve depending on what you needed.
It actually did add a little bit of extra spin.
Sure it did. But I guess I feel like so too does practicing proper technique.
17.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what I mean. So I do think that some of that idea of like the lightest shoe ever makes all the difference. It probably makes some difference, but it also allows Nike to say they have the fastest shoe ever because it's the lightest shoe ever.
Oh, well, you know what?
And also they pay Cristiano Ronaldo a lot of money.
What wouldn't necessarily slow you down but would keep you warm is a Ruffneck scarf.
Wow.
Today's show, I worked hard on that segue, by which I mean I struggled to make that segue work.
There we are.
Today's show is sponsored by Ruffneck Scarves,
it sure is.
Providers of scarves for US Soccer, MLS, USL, NCAA as well. But you can also make your own custom scarf with Ruffneck Scarves.
You can indeed, which led Daryl Grove to ask on Twitter, if you were to design a custom Ruffneck scarf to represent this week's UEFA Champions League games, what would it look like?
Steve Mock says his would be blank on both sides because Uverse didn't record the games even though I set it to record.
That seems like a very specific type of scarf. Keith Kalmbach scouting...
Can you imagine going onto the Ruffneck website, choosing the custom design, and just asking for a blank scarf?
Yeah,
to protest Uverse.
The Uverse scarf. I like it. Keith Kalmbach scouting said, Jurgen Klopp smiling and holding up two fingers and Pep looking all sad on one side. On the other side, it would be a kid in an Ajax jersey holding up a wall against a flood of money and a Luke Shaw with business as usual shirt.
Oh, poor Luke Shaw.
Yeah.
Poor Luke Shaw.
He's doing all right.
Robert from sunny SoCal says, on one side it would be the English press writing the headline, Pep Fraudiola overthinks it again. That headline probably existed somewhere. On the other side it would say, zero gunner shots on Golshka heading for the exit.
Wow. That was some legwork there, Robert. That was some legwork.
I love a pun. That's a pun scarf.
I know you do, and it's worth noting here that Daryl is the one who chose these to be read out on the show. Royce the Voice, as an homage to the comedy and tragedy masks, the scarf would have the comedy face Tottenham on one side with 1-0 home win, and tragedy face Tottenham on the other because of Harry Kane's injury.
No update on Harry Kane's injury that I've seen. I've heard that it's bad. No one said a number of months.
Yep.
I've heard the phrase season-threatening.
Ooh. I mean, that also feels like a lot of hype in the same way that Weston McKennie rolled his ankle and suddenly he was definitely going to miss the Gold Cup and maybe be out for like next season as well.
That is true. As long as Harry's back for the UEFA Nations League semi-finals, I'm all good.
I'm sure that's what he's
I
concerned
have
about
my
as well.
priorities. Spurs fans may have different ones, but I've got mine.
I can guess which one Harry Kane is more likely to reflect, and it's not yours. Before you try to beat me to it.
So you can design your own custom scarf. You can use it to raise funds for your club or for some of the non-profit that you want to raise funds for. Doesn't have to be a non-profit. You can't get a discount on that, but you do get a good deal. We promise. The margins are good.
All right.
If you just see a scarf on ruffneckscarves.com that you like the look of, but you want 20% off, go to ruffneckscarves.com, go to the checkout, and then enter the promo code TOTALSOCCERSHOW, all one word. You'll get 20% off any scarf you see.
There we go.
Including the Total Soccer Show Hello and Welcome scarf.
It's a lovely scarf. I like the colors. So once again, that's Total Soccer Show as the discount code for 20% off. Thank you once again, as always, to Ruffneck Scarves for sponsoring today's episode.
How many times do you think we've said that?
Several hundred.
Several hundred.
Probably, maybe not several hundred. I'd say around 100.
It's like one a week for 3 years.
Oh boy. Okay, yeah, we're up there now.
It's like 150 maybe.
We're moving on up. We're moving on up in those numbers.
Okay, next question comes from RJ Wilson. Oh, this question was both brilliant and terrible.
Why am I answering this question?
I'll help you.
Okay.
RJ Wilson asks, Why is Portsmouth FC nicknamed Pompey?
Right.
Because it is, right? They sing "Play Pompey," like the fans do. People will refer to Portsmouth in the as a shorthand as Pompey lost 1-0 this week. All Pompey's money's gone. Have you read that won the FA Cup but ruined Pompey's finances? Yep. Things that people might say about Pompey.
You're saying Pompey. Is that how you say it in England? I've always heard it as Pompey.
I might be mispronouncing it like the town with the volcano.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's Pompey.
I was like, maybe I've just been mispronouncing this the entire time. Okay.
It's me.
Gotcha. Okay.
I done it wrong.
Well, that's why I'm answering this question. We've gotten to the bottom of it. And the answer is, I don't know, because there is really no...
Not because there's no answer. It's because there's like 200 different answers.
Well, there's no official answer. There's no like one accepted answer that maybe there's a couple other ones. It seems like there's lots of variability here. There's one that I think is more likely than the others. I don't think it's that there was a female innkeeper who gave a speech about General Pompey and
who's in the Roman Empire?
Before it was Roman Empire, Roman Republic. But basically somebody in the audience like heard the story and was very emotionally affected and said like poor old Pompey, and then when Portsmouth conceded a goal later that week or something, they said poor old Pompey again and it stuck. That seems like a slightly apocryphal story.
It does, right?
I do like the one that it's a contraction of Portsmouth Point, which is the port, I guess, there. Yeah. So it would be abbreviated to POM for Portsmouth, and then point would be the P, so Pompey.
I read it was drunken sailors maybe
also that
on their way, were asking their way there, and it sounded like Pompey because they were saying Portsmouth boys.
Yeah, drunken sailors can explain a lot of things. But the one that I think is maybe the most likely is La Pompey, which is it was a French frigate, I think it was, in 1797 that was surrendered to the British. It became HMS Pompey, fought in multiple wars, multiple insurrections, became the guard ship of the Portsmouth port, and then became a notorious prison ship in the Napoleonic Wars, so much so that I guess like people in the north knew Portsmouth as Pompey because of Pompey Prison.
Oh, this one makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. So if you know the town, the city as Pompey, if it becomes this thing that's very recognizable to outsiders, then I think eventually, and I feel like maybe there's also the joke of like, oh, we're playing the prison team this time. You could see it that way too.
So you mentioned insurrections. Was that essentially that ship was involved in stopping people leaving the British Empire when they were trying real hard to?
That's possible.
That's what it sounds like to me.
It could be. I know there's a lot of like 18th century, early 19th century history that I don't quite know, specifically from an English-French perspective.
That era sounds like Britain planting their flag all over the place when they weren't invited.
Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah.
That checks out.
Okay, so there's some other, I think that's the one.
That's
because that's actually a thing called Pompey, right? So, but there are some other ones as well. It's insane how many.
It's worth noting the ship was Pompee, whereas Pompey, the way I've heard it said and spelled was Pompey.
Yeah,
so it might just be the Anglicization, whatever it is. Yeah,
we also do that.
Yeah,
we also do that. Yeah. So the other explanation I saw is that the origins of the Portsmouth football team was in the Royal Artillery, like British military stuff, and that one day a unit from the Royal Artillery were doing duty in France, and they did a job that normally firemen do. So the French started calling them Les Pompiers because apparently that means firemen in French, I believe.
Sure,
that doesn't quite add up, right?
I mean, it could add up.
It could, but it probably doesn't.
Exactly.
The other one is that Portuguese sailors thought the town of Portsmouth looked like Bombay, which is what Mumbai used to be called. And so they started calling it that, but then it gets anglicised to Pompey. That doesn't feel quite right either, does it?
I mean, it could be like some swirling combination of all of these because
I've got one more as well.
Like it might be that like the firemen were like, oh, that's what we're called back home. It works perfectly, and then it all kind of connects.
In Egypt, I believe there is Pompey's Pillar, which was erected like in honor of the general that we talked about earlier. And apparently, some Portsmouth-based sailors, when they were over there in Egypt, again, Britain planting the flag all over the place, climbed the pillar, which is very, very tall. And so the Portsmouth sailors became known as Pompey's boys because they were famous for getting to the top of this pillar.
Okay, I can see that.
I give that a maybe, right?
Yeah,
I give that a maybe.
That's a maybe. I think anytime there's like a historical connection that sort of makes sense, as opposed to like, and then they might have been called this, and that could have been brought back here, and then it might have been used by the football club. Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one.
But here's the thing: is what I read is that the earliest written reference to Pompey refers to the football team Portsmouth Football Club.
Yep. So there you go.
It's impossible to trace it.
It is. So we should just give up and not answer this question anymore.
No, I think we answered it really well. The answer is we don't know, but here's all the possible explanations. What did we rank as the most popular? Oh, the most possible? The French ship, right? Yeah,
the French ship.
I will go with that.
All right. Final question on the day comes from Kai Ventinger, who asks, why hasn't or doesn't Ike Opara get any looks with the national team? He seems like the perfect player to put up with the CONCACAFery.
I agree. He could put it with CONCACAF. I think right now he's not a Berhalter player.
Yep.
Because unlike, say, John Brooks, Walker Zimmerman, Matt Miazga, I don't think of him as a guy who's going to split lines with brilliant passes. I think of him as a defender first, not necessarily a ball player.
As an example, like maybe this is slightly unfair, but I looked at his passing stats from WhoScored.com. They're okay. They're not great. 34.6 passes per game, 2 long balls per game, 71% possession. Contrast that with John Brooks, obviously playing in a different league with different styles, but 60 passes per game, 7 long balls per game, 86.6% accuracy.
Yeah, he gets that ball forward and into feet, right? Yeah. So that's maybe why Berhalter's not calling him up. But he's been MLS Defender of the Year previous to this. And still not really got called up beyond, one cap maybe in a January game?
Maybe Saracen called him up as well, I think, at some point in recent memory, obviously. I think I remember reading about, like, either Saracen did call him up or was thinking about calling him up, one or the other. But I would say, like, my 2-part answer to this overall, to go back to, like, older times when he was,
times?
I mean, he's 30. He's been around for a while. So, like, not necessarily right now under Berhalter, but I would say it's basically he had injury problems at the worst possible time for, like, getting those call-ups, and then basically being an MLS center back in 2011 and 2012, because that's when Jurgen Klinsmann comes in, and I think Jurgen Klinsmann was a little bit more looking to Europe and trying to bring in some players to play defense for the United States, and maybe wasn't as focused on, like, making Major League Soccer happy. So I think that factors into it, especially because then you look at when he started to struggle with injuries. 2011, he has 8 games on the season, 2012, 16, 2013, 18, and then 2014, 3, 2015, 6.
And that would be the time when he was like in his early to mid-20s, and that is kind of when you get your international start, right? So I imagine now, like, people look at him now, like 29, 30, and think, oh, it's a bit late to start an international career, right?
And
so, he kind of just got injuries at the wrong time. Because we looked at this, right? Or you looked at this. He's been injury-free for like 3 seasons now,
2016.
Not completely free, but not like no season-ruining injuries.
2016, 26 appearances, 2017, 30, 2018, 31. But that's what I mean where I say it was the wrong time, because I think by the time he's consistently fit and playing very well, Jurgen Klinsmann is sort of settled on the people he wants to play center back. There's some experimentation, but it's usually like, what happens if Jermaine Jones plays center back? Or maybe we'll bring in this one player and see what happens. It didn't work out. We'll call him in 5 more times.
And there is a category of like really good MLS defenders like Chad Marshall who don't really get that much international recognition. Michael Parkhurst maybe in the last couple of years. It is just it's weirdly a thing that happens.
It sure is. Steve Birnbaum, I would say, kind of in that category as well. He gets a few more caps, but not as many as you would expect.
Actually, he maybe had that injury thing where he had a good game for the US, and then I think he got a concussion. And then it takes him a long time to come back, and now he's like, he kind of missed the boat, right? Because now the boat is ball playing centre backs.
And then the other like one that we haven't mentioned is the fact that then Bruce Arena takes over, and maybe it would have made sense to call him in there, but Arena, as we've talked about previously, didn't really want to gamble with World Cup qualification. Because why would you? I hate everything. But I think the idea of maybe he would have gotten some if they had qualified in like that January camp in 2018, but that they didn't. I think that was when he was called up, but still, it's not quite maybe what he was looking for overall.
Didn't you ask Matt Doyle as
well? I
did.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure we got all of our answers in before I read Matt Doyle's, because it basically confirms what we said, but I wanted us to get credit instead of him.
Okay.
Doyle.
What did Matt Doyle say?
He said, in 3 tweets, which shows you how seriously Matt Doyle takes questions. 3 texts.
Oh, okay.
Which shows you how seriously he takes correspondence about Major League Soccer players, and specifically Ike Opara, I'm guessing. He'd have been a regular if he could stay healthy. His first healthy season didn't come until 2017, so there was no way to know how good he'd actually be by then.
Interesting.
Bruce would have had to decide to blow up the locker room before the end of the hexagonal to take him in 2017. Then obviously 2018 happened, and we weren't going to call in a 30-year-old defender, and that was that. But Doyle concludes he's one of the great what-ifs in terms of health from his past, from this past decade, placing him alongside Steve Zakuani, Charlie Davies, and Stu Holden. If those guys stay healthy, a lot of things are different right now. Alas, says Matt Doyle.
Alas. Oh, no. I guess alas, we missed the World Cup.
It does sort of lead us to ponder if we should do a show about the like what if 11 of the maybe 11 best American players who didn't quite make it for any number of reasons. I'm
in. Let's do that. Maybe not right now. I think we should do some research before we do it, but that show's got to happen in the next couple of weeks.
Can I ask you one like totally speculative question about it, though?
Yeah.
Because I am wondering now, if he chooses to play for the United States, do you think there's an argument that Giuseppe Rossi's career is different? Like, just like in like a butterfly effect, chaos theory sort of way.
Oh, because it's not like specifically when he got injured and if that was like on Italy duty or something. I fully believe in but chaos theory, butterfly effects, like on a
sliding doors sort of situation.
But in like a small,
another topical movie reference.
I believe it in like a traceable way.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't have to be like butterfly on one side of the world and explosion on the other side of the world. I think it can be like you deviate on your path slightly, and everything becomes different. So yes.
Can I also just add that like 17 or 18-year-old Taylor was furious to find out that sliding doors existed because he was sure that he had come up with the best idea for a movie where see like two realities of one life based on one tiny decision.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, that already happened? All right, then. Never mind. Stupid Gwyneth Paltrow, who I think is in that movie. I've never seen it.
She's definitely in that movie.
There we go.
Yeah. You've never seen it? Genuinely, it's actually a
No, I was
movie.
too furious to see it. They took my $1 million idea. All I was left with was the jump to conclusions, Matt. And then Office Space came along.
You just always one idea behind. At least you had that idea for that podcast. That kind of worked out.
Yeah.
Right? All right. Thank you to everybody for
You're talking about
questions.
cereal, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
If you've got a question for us, but yours was about the food, right? If you've got a question for us, please send it to totalsoccershow.com/questions as a form you can fill out. If you're a supporter of the show via totalsoccershow.com/join, if you support us at $10 a month or more, we guarantee to answer one listener question per month.
We sure do. And we really do enjoy it because it makes me Google weird things, which definitely happened several times in this, but also just, again, as I've said, I think previously, just think about things differently, but also... Like the Ike Opara question, for example. Ike Opara is the one who likes Parks and Rec, right? Like
yes. Well, he just said Parks and Rec over The Office.
Yeah.
It's not even a debate.
Exactly.
Instantly my favorite player.
And there are moments like that, we were both like, oh, we love Ike Opara. And then we watched him play a few times. And we were like, he's great. Why doesn't he play? But it's sort of, I think I've talked about this before, the idea of like how far down the rabbit hole you want to go. And I think there's lots of stuff where I'm just like, he just doesn't get call-ups. And then with this question, it makes me kind of delve deeper and think deeper and think on different levels. And that's what I like about it.
All right. Final thing on today's show is the contest winner. So do you remember, late last week, we announced that we had a copy of Caitlin Murray's book, The National Team, to give away. It's all about the story of the US women's national team. I've got to admit, I haven't read it yet, but I've seen tweets from other people who started reading it, and they love it. Because it's not just like a chronological history. It's a lot of the personality of all those players that were involved in like the 99 team and all that kind of stuff, right? So Caitlin Murray's book, very popular so far. We have one copy to give away. We asked people to essentially help promote the book by tweeting, I want this book, with the hashtag and the URL USWNTbook.com. Many people did. We chose a winner at random.
Who we choose?
Do you mind if I share how we chose it? Because I think it was kind of brilliant.
Sure.
I just scrolled up and down through the list really rapidly, put my finger on the screen, and asked Taylor to hit stop.
Yep.
So it's like a roulette type thing.
And to be difficult, I think
to yell stop, excuse me.
I think what happened was you said, I'm going to scroll down, and as soon as I said stop.
Yeah. Just get it over with quick.
So commiserations to people who submitted later on.
You underestimate how fast I am. I was already doing it. I'd been up and down a few times.
Okay.
So everybody had a chance to be stopped.
Okay.
The winner is...
Let's drag this out a little bit more.
False Dimitri III.
Oh,
which is, I'm sure, not his real name.
I mean, you don't know.
But it's a Twitter name, yeah.
Unless he's stolen Dimitri's identity.
So I think False Dimitri follows us.
Time.
We'll follow back tomorrow. I don't want to ruin the surprise. I want to hope False Dimitri hears this before this happens. We'll follow back in the next couple of days. We'll send False Dimitri a DM, get an address, and we will mail the book.
All right.
And by we, I think I mean me. I've got a feeling I'll be doing this.
I'm pretty sure you're not going to be in office for the next couple of days, so
That's
that might
true.
end up being me.
All right.
And I believe the stamps are on my desk.
Oh, brilliant. Yep. All right, so congratulations to False Dimitri. Everybody else, thank you for helping promote the book and entering the contest. I would say if you want to get the book, you can still go to USWNTbook.com and you can buy Caitlin's book there.
Such a good address.
Yeah, she did. Either Caitlin or her publisher did great to get that address.
I'm giving Caitlin the credit.
Yeah. All right. It's actually the new number one after George getting FIFA.WTF.
Forget about that. I love George. I really do.
Taylor Rockwell, thank you for answering all these questions with me today.
Right back at you, buddy. But before we go, I have to ask, what is the likelihood that there is a URL out there somewhere that is specifically about George's dogs that George has registered?
Oh, he's bought it, for sure.
So just 100% likelihood.
100%.
Cool. All right. That's what I figured.
So thank you for answering the questions with me. Listeners, thank you for listening. I know we put out a ton of content. I also know that not everybody listens to everything, but some people listen to every episode. I want those people to know we really appreciate it because that is a time commitment every day, right? So thank you for listening. There'll be more Total Soccer Show tomorrow.
It's also, I would say, if you're still listening, you should always listen to the end of shows, especially when multiple ones have been recorded in the same day, because...
because this is Wednesday night, ready for Thursday.
I'm not going to say we, because I'm not going to throw you in on this one. I'll just take the credit for this one or take the blame. Get a little loopy near the end.
Yeah.
Hence rambling monologues about sliding doors.
Honestly, I like it. It gets loose, but still just tight enough to be publishable.
Well, I silenced myself before I went on a rant about a former sponsor, so there you go.
I want to ask who that is
There
after
you go.
the show. So tomorrow there's an interview with a Roma player who may or may not be US men's national team eligible. Also, Top Draw Soccer Show will have a new episode this week, right?
It will indeed.
Yeah?
Yes. Sorry. That made me laugh very hard. You asked it sort of knowing the answer, but I think also maybe genuinely asking.
Well, I didn't know
at
if
the
the
same time.
guest was guaranteed or not.
It is. Meg Linehan will be on the show to
Yes.
discuss the NWSL, the start of the NWSL season, specifically rookies in the NWSL.
Okay, so players that we won't be familiar with, but Meg will. So getting
There you go.
ready for the NWSL season.
Yep.
All right, Taylor, thanks again for plugging the next couple shows.
Right back,
Please
everybody.
subscribe to Top Draw Soccer Show if you
Do it.
haven't already. Listeners, again, thank you for listening.
Agreed.
We'll talk to you again very soon.